Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today I'm speaking with Dr. David Leitner. Dr. Leitner has spent the last 15 years as a followership, leadership, and strategy educator. He not only teaches these topics academically, he also runs workshops, seminars, and lectures for multinational companies, the Israeli Defense Forces, military preparation academies, Israel Gap Year programs, youth groups, and more. As an IDF disabled veteran suffering from CRPS, David has been an advocate for accessibility and inclusion for over 20 years. He is married with 3 kids, and he is the only International Practical Shooting Confederation wheelchair competitor in Israel. David and I connected spontaneously on LinkedIn, thank you LinkedIn algorithm, after commenting on the same followership article. He has such a clear, sharp focus on followership as a key to organizational strategy that I really wanted to invite him to share more of his perspective and training methods with you here. Dr. D, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sharna. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, pleasure to speak with you again. I'd love to start by inviting you to share your followership origin story, so to speak, which I believe was back during your PhD research. So would you just share a little bit with listeners about how that part of your story unfolded?
Sure. So I actually come from the world of politics and international relations, military strategy. That's where this all began. My BA was in politics with a focus on Army strategy and national security. I then did a direct PhD where I was looking to judge and gauge the leadership of the United States of the West. How well was the United States leading the West in its response to weapons of mass destruction proliferation? And I was trying to figure out the best way that I could gauge and judge the effectiveness of the U.S. leadership. And I stumbled across Robert Kelly's followership theory. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I can use this as the gauge. Instead of looking at the U.S. at all, I won't look at the U.S. almost in any way, shape, or form. I'll just use them as the guide for what is it they want, and then look at whether or not Western states, specifically Britain, Australia, and the United States, are being good followers, and what kind of followers they're being over a period of time. And I started deep diving into the world of followership. This was back in 2005 through 2010. And so the literature, Robert Kelly was still the main piece of literature out there. There was a couple more things that I sort of touched on, but he was the one who gave the clearest framework for me to use. And from there, it was just like, okay, this is a thing. I had no idea that followership existed until then. Mm-hmm. And it was very interesting because it sort of took what is supposed to be this theory about interpersonal relationships, and I was applying it to international bodies and national bodies, and it changed my perspective on leadership and followership in a lot of ways. And that was really eye-opening, because it means that when we look at things like leadership and followership, we really do need to think about them differently than we normally do. We don't need to think about them as one person and a group of people, which is the common function of like how you describe leadership. One person guiding a group of people to do. It's one unit. Choose your unit. The West. So if it's the West, it's the United States. If it's companies, then is it Apple? And then who are the followers? And what kind of followers do they have? And what's interesting is you can take Apple as a unit, and then you can take all of the people who ascribe to Apple as their thing that they love and judge them as followers as separate units. And you don't have to stay on one level plane of systems where it's person to person or company to company or state to state. You can go state. And it also allows you to do ideas as units. Like you can say democracy as a unit and go, well, who follows democracy? Or capitalism as a unit. And you go, well, who ascribes to and is trying to manifest capitalism in their day-to-day lives? And how are they going about doing that? And what kind of followership are they expressing in that relationship with that idea? And so it really changes the dynamic of how we engage in thinking about followership.
Thank you so much for expanding the possibilities in this way. What an awesome reversal to ask a question like, how are those other countries following the US leadership rather than the reverse? I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you want to find out how well someone or some state is leading. Take a look at what's happening with the followers of that state or the presumed followers. What are they doing or what are they not doing? I love it. And I also like this broader framework of conceptual following, I'll call it, because it lets individuals think about themselves as followers in so many different ways, well beyond the sphere of work.
Even on Facebook or on LinkedIn, like the idea of being a follower and what being a good follower looks like in those places changes when you start thinking about it in those terms as well. So there's so many different facets to this and so many different ways to think about these relationships. And I think it's really important to expand this into those different realms because it allows for followership to be a much broader and deeper concept than the interpersonal relationship between a worker and a manager.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I wonder if you have any examples of how you've adopted this broader and deeper understanding of followership into your own life.
It makes choices much more real when it comes to where I'm putting my time and energy, why I'm putting my time and energy there. We talk about things like work-life boundaries, right? I don't like the term work-life balance. I think that you don't need to balance your life with anything, but you need boundaries that clearly differentiate between I'm working right now and now I'm spending my time doing other things other than work. And I have a friend who talks about work-life harmony, which I think is very, very relevant in the same idea of you create boundaries to create that harmony. When you make choices as a follower that are deeply engaged with the concept of followership, with what type of follower, what am I doing to participate in this process? How much of my energy am I going to give to whatever process we're talking about? That has a huge impact on how much I'm willing to do for different ideas and for different people who want me to be, a follower for them or a person who helps them do something. Well, if I'm helping you do something, then I'm following you. And so if that's the case, then let's talk about how much energy you get from me in order to do that and why that's a choice that I get to make. It's taught me to say no.
Yes. Yes to no.
Yes to no.
Yes to the empowered no's. I like the idea that giving our time and attention is followership, no matter where we are in life or in work. And I also see a connection there to the struggle many of us have experienced to just focus on the thing we want to focus on in this age of digital distraction. I think it could be a real wake-up call to ask yourself, how much time and attention do I really want to give to Facebook or Instagram or even LinkedIn? Am I giving that time intentionally? Am I checking my email on purpose for a good reason? Or is it just a compulsive behavior? And I will include myself in that. So yeah, we say we don't want to blindly follow like sheep, but it's really easy to do with these technologies. But let's move on to your thoughts on strategy. You see followership, and you've spoken about it, as integral to strategic process, including, of course, organizational strategic process. So maybe let's start there. What does this mean for you?
So let's start with a basic definition of how I see followership. Followership is the decision to ascribe to a process, a strategic process that supports and furthers the manifestation of a mutually defined purpose. It's not about a leader. It's about me ascribing to some kind of process, a strategic process. And then if we want to go to the idea of exemplary, courageous followership, really followership at its best, right? It's the decision to align and actively participate in a strategic process or mission that supports and furthers the manifestation of a vision or an objective or a goal in pursuit of that mutually defined idea or purpose. if you think about what an organization is, it is this thing that has vision, right? This unit that has vision, and it's got purpose, and it's got a mission statement, and it engages strategy in order to make those things real. And it expects everyone who's involved in the organization to align with the different missions and tasks and goals and objectives that are being defined for the process that will lead to the manifestation of those ideas. Mm-hmm. Well, that means that the glue between the organization and the people is the strategy. Like, that's the glue between them. That's the thing that holds them together. The process is what we're striving for, but the thing that we all ascribe to, the thing that we're all willing to participate in, is the process that's going to get us from here to there. So it's true for a lot of things, but for organizations specifically, companies and businesses, it is super duper true. And in the military, it's very, very true that the thing that holds these people together is that mutual acceptance of how we're going to do this. We each have our role in this thing. We each have to do our part in order to make the mission that we've set out on successful. And so for me, strategy isn't some amorphic, hey, some idea out there that this is how we're going to do this thing. No, it's really the thing we have to talk about and break down so that everybody knows what objectives they're working towards and what goals they have and how their tasks build into those goals, because that allows followers to make good choices. It allows followers to use their energy in the most effective manner, and it allows leaders to know which followers are doing what and how to use them to the best of their ability. Because that's the role of leadership. It's to take these people and guide them on that process and utilize the skills and capabilities that they bring to the table to manifest that future.
Thank you for laying all that out. I really appreciate the glue metaphor, because I'm always super curious how people describe the interface between leadership and followership. And I think strategic process, as you've described it here, is a great way to think about that coming together of the two forces, whether it's two people, two entities, or just two ways of thinking. I also love how you explained how the clarity of a strategy then allows followers in an organizational context to make good choices. And I want to underline that, because we hear a lot about decision-making as a leadership skill, but followers are making choices all the time. And I think that's a really important part of understanding what we actually do when we're following someone else or following a process. And it's an important part of learning how to be a really great follower.
Well, followership in and of itself is a choice, right? I don't have to follow you. Even if I'm working for you, I don't necessarily have to be a good follower. I can be an alienated follower. I can be worse than an alienated follower. I can be the follower who's the slacker, who's not really doesn't even see himself as part of the process. I'm here for my paycheck and that's it. Well, that's a really, that's not a good situation. And so if followership is a choice, then even more so when we talk about how I use my energy, if I want to be a good follower, that's even more of the choice. That's the depth of the choice that we're talking about.
I'm going to switch gears a bit now and ask about your workshops. I know you present to many different audiences, so many different kinds of workshops. What are some of your favorite ways to introduce followership so that it really lands with people, especially if they're used to the more leader-centric way of thinking?
There are different ways I've had workshops. There are workshops where I will take a cohort of leaders, whether it's first-time team leaders or even middle management or C-suite, and we will talk about the impact of followership. And one of the most impactful things I've ever done is in a cohort of CEOs and C-suites said, hey guys, and this was people from different companies. I said, how many of you think it's important to have your people follow you well and put their time and energy to the things you think are important? And everyone went, me. And I said, well, do you guys know what followership is? And they went, what? And I said, we have to have this discussion. And then we took this deep dive into followership where we talked about how strategy glues people towards this process, towards these vision statements. And then we started talking about understanding the different types of followers and the nature of followership, the different levels of followership, what it means to be a courageous follower, what it means to have a culture of followership in an organization. And everyone went, oh, we've been leadership centric and we're actually doing harm to the people who want to step up and speak and give ideas. So that's one thing that I've done is I've sort of just thrown that in people's faces. And I found that it works best really actually with the higher level people because they expect everyone to follow them. When it comes to the lower level people, one of the things that I love to do is we'll do I do personal introspection as part of my workshops where I ask each of them to take 5 minutes and write down every person that they have a relationship with in the organization and who they lead and who they follow. And then I ask them to consider what their relationship is as a follower with the people who lead them and the people who they see as higher in authority than them. And then I start asking questions like, did you only list people who are in a position above you on the organization, or did you also consider people who have emerged as leaders on your team where you found yourself following them? And all of a sudden, these team leads, these young team leads who have not really thought about emergent leadership go, oh, wait a second. And then I go, you guys want a few more minutes? And they start writing some more. And it's great because then they really start going, well, this guy's great at leading this kind of thing. This guy's great at leading this kind of thing. And I go, now we can have a conversation about what it means to be a follower and good followership and what it means to have emergent leaders on your team and what it means to have different kinds of followers doing different kinds of things based on whichever strategy you've chosen and where you've chosen to put purpose. Because when you use strategy and you choose a strategy, there's going to be someone who's alienated. There's going to be someone on your team who doesn't think the strategy you've chosen is great. And then you have to start start using different techniques to get everyone aligned. So we start talking about things like the yes and method and setting clear boundaries on when the decision's made and what it means to transition from discussion into implementation and things like that. And those are really important discussions because it allows those young leaders to both see themselves as followers and to judge their own followership. How good am I at demonstrating good followership? Which is an important question you can ask them. Like, when someone emerges as a leader on your team, how are you demonstrating good followership to the rest of your team? And that's huge.
Huge. I think you maybe already answered it, but I'm kind of enamored of this idea of emergent leadership and the way it reveals the needed followership skills. So I wonder if you have any other examples of working with teams on that concept specifically. And I mean, I love the writing exercise. Anything else that might give listeners ideas of how to explore that with groups and help individuals like own their followership role in the interest of emergent leadership?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to give you two examples, and one of them is a very personal one for me. It goes back to when I was in the Army, and another one which is more businessy oriented. I'm going to start with mine though. The unit that I was in is considered one of the elite units. It's called Maglan. It's one of the elite units of the IDF. And they have an ethos of bottom-up thinking. That means if somebody who is low down on the totem pole comes up with a good idea, everybody who agrees with that idea is going to start following that person and working with it. When I was in the Army 20 some odd years ago, I was a sniper specialist, and I brought with me from America the first ghillie suit. Israel didn't have ghillie suits back then. For those who don't know, a ghillie suit is a camouflage vest and pants that you wear, and it makes you basically look like a bush. And so I brought over the first pieces for it, and I started working on this, and I created the first one in my unit. And then from there, I had a whole group of people who started working with me, and it just went from there. And that's part of the ethos of that unit, is that you don't have to be an officer. You don't have to be a high-ranking officer to come up with a good idea and start getting people on board for it. And if you can get people on board and it sounds like a good idea, officers will follow you, and people who are much higher ranked than you will start sponsoring you, which is another very important part of followership is getting people to sponsor you when they have the rank and they have the ability to pull strings and make sure you get the resources you need, or make sure you're aligned with the value systems that are important to the organization. So that's my own personal, where this sort of comes from. And then in organizations, it's one of those things where we talk a lot about position leadership. And it's very important for me to make clear to people that position does not equal leadership. There is a difference between management, a position that you hold, and being a leader. And the difference is quite large, with some overlap. It's not that it's completely disconnected, but that overlap totally depends upon whether or not you perceive the differentiation between the two. And so we start talking about position leadership and what it really means. You've been given authority, but are they really following you? And one of the best ways to do that is to look at something called situational leadership. Situational leadership gives a whole methodology of looking at the developmental levels of your followers and then what kind of leadership you can use to sort of address those followers and move them through the different levels of development. And that's a huge part of how you recognize emergent leaders, because you see people who are developmentally maybe not so high, but all of a sudden they have some brilliant idea. And that's the point where you act as follower. We talk about that when you recognize that happening and what it means when that happens. And the other thing you can do, which I really like doing, we'll run simulations. I have a simulation that I love to run. It's kind of awkward, but it's kind of cool. You take a whole bunch of chairs, you take a room, you take a whole bunch of chairs, you divide the room up so that it's basically a very big maze, which is very hard to get through. If you can get yourself some like fake walls that'll make it hard for everybody to see everything at once, and then you put everyone around the outside of the room looking in, like on the walls, and you take one person and you blindfold them. And that person then has to announce to everyone, hey guys, I need to get from here to the other side of the room. And help. And he can't see or she can't see where she's going. And now all of a sudden you have all of these people emerging as leaders. Someone who can see what's going on is able to give guidance. Someone who can't see what's going on can't give guidance. And you'll see certain people emerge and other people giving suggestions and help along the way as well. And hey, I'm passing him. He's coming through the wall towards you. It just creates this really interesting dynamic. And then you ask at the end, who is the leader? Who is the leader? Right? And everyone goes, well, we don't know, because we don't know. And you go, well, technically the position leader was the person who said, help, I need to get from here to there. That I gave him a position, right? And now I go, okay, but who emerged as leaders? And how did the person have to follow in order for him to get to where he wanted to go? And all of a sudden it goes, wow, I had to be a leader on this part, and I had to be a leader on this part, and I had to be a leader on this part, guiding this part of the process. I had to be a leader guiding this part of the process. And along the way, we all had to support the leader get from here to there. Well, that's what emergent leadership looks like. Like, that's what it looks like. It just happens when it comes to programmers, it's programmers doing it. And when it's, DevOps guys, it's DevOps guys doing it. And when it's, customer success people, it's a customer success team people doing it. It's just, the tools and tactics are different, but the concept is still the same.
Yeah, beautiful. When I hear stories like this, it really gives me even more certainty that the flow between leadership and followership is in fact the healthy state for humans and human groups, and that we've somehow just forgotten the followership part of us or culturally disowned it maybe. And that's why we struggle to lead and to understand leadership despite the billions of books and trainings and degrees devoted to it. And I think nowhere do I see that more clearly than in case studies and real life experiences of emergent leadership. I wonder what you think about that.
They do very fundamentally to go hand in hand. People who are more cognizant of followership are more cognizant of and aware when someone is emerging as a leader, and they make the choice to follow. Versus, I'm not aware of this, but it's happening sort of around me, and my capacity to really make that choice is sort of diminished because I almost see his or her emergence as a threat. Right, as opposed to something which actually bolsters our system and makes us better. People who have position leadership very often will see that as a threat. Oh, he's emerging as leader. Push him down. Can't give him support. But no, like, that's not a smart thing to do. Now you've just destroyed a strategic process, which could help you, succeed. Why would you do that? But we do it all the time, and I think part of the reason is because we've become so leadership centric. It's we're so wary of that idea of, like, I'm the leader now, so I have to lead. That if we don't teach team leads that it's okay to follow one of your people, It's essential for you to follow the people above you and translate what they give you effectively to the people below you, right? And show them what it means to be a good follower and talk in the language of followership. Guys, listen, this is what we got from them. It's super important that we do this because of, and giving them the why and showing them how that why attaches you to the leader and then to the manager, your higher management, and then to the organization's vision does wonders for it. And emergent leadership is lost because people don't want to be followers, especially when they're in a position of leadership, because it somehow negatively impacts their authority.
Yeah, I do think that's a huge stumbling block. And I'm always eager to learn new ways to reclaim followership as good, not only okay, but as this really powerful, inspiring role to occupy and to choose to be in every given situation. I know you also work one-on-one with clients. I wonder how followership comes up in that scenario, and if you've had any conversations about that, like reclaiming your own identity as follower, your own choice as follower, as a really great thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. Some of my clients come to me because they're looking to move jobs. They feel like they've hit some kind of ceiling. They're not being promoted. And one of the first things we start talking about is, well, how are you demonstrating your followership? Is the reason you're not getting promoted because you're not skilled? Or is it because the way you're relating to the people above you, below you, and around you is negatively impacting how they see you and your ability to get things done? And it also impacts things like interview processes. Like you get to that last level and you're really deep into it and you've shown all the skills and everything, and then you just don't get the job. And part of the reason may be because they're looking for someone who's an exemplary follower. Like they're not looking, you can talk leadership all you want, but if you're not demonstrating exemplary followership, it's going to impact you. And so one of the things I do a lot with people when they come to me, yes, we talk about leadership, but predominantly what I'll talk about in my one-on-ones, the nature of it is that we're going to take you and we're going to look at how are you demonstrating courageous followership. Now we have to break that down. What does it mean to be courageous? We have a huge discussion about, well, how are you demonstrating courage? And how are you engaging independent thinking and critical thinking? And how are you engaging proactive action? And how are you taking things off your leader's plate? And all these things. And all of a sudden people will see that what they've been so focused on has been their own little world of the tasks that they have and the things they have to do. And it changes the nature of the dynamic they have with their teams and with their leaders. And if they are already middle management, very often with the people who are the team leads below them, because it helps them be a better sponsor for them, which is really amazing when that happens.
I feel like what you're describing here is a whole approach to professional development from the followership perspective. And that's pretty amazing because we actually know from research studies that the majority of promotions are for great followership. They're not for great leadership. Even if the term followership isn't being used, that's what really counts more often than not, because that's what leaders see you doing most of the time. They see how you follow them. Your boss sees how you follow them, and then they recommend you for a promotion.
So there's a story I like to tell. I had a client, and she was actually a team lead, and she and I worked together to create her personal working manual. And what part of the personal working manual isn't just like, hey, this is how I like to be contacted and things like that. But if there's anything cute or fun or humorous or that sort of shows who you are as an individual, put it in there as well. And she wrote, don't talk to me about problems before I've had my coffee. And then about a month after we finished the one-on-ones, she wrote me a note saying, Dr. D, guess what? Apparently one of her team people came into her room, knocked on the door and was like, hey, have you had your coffee yet this morning? And she went, no. She said, okay, no problem. Walked out. About 5 minutes later, comes back and says, you need to have this. I need to talk to you. And then walks out again. And the person walks out. It comes back in half an hour later, and they have this really like, it was a hard discussion, but the way it went down was such that because she had presented her personal working manual to each of her teammates and, the people who work with her in a one-on-one, and said to them, listen, this is how I work. And she made clear to them, hey, this is part of what being a follower for means. If you want to talk to me about something like this, I need you on board with this idea. And she did. And it totally changed the dynamic of the discussion. As opposed to grumpy and angry and upset and everything, it was a laugh. And it was a hard talk about a real problem that they were having on the team, about another teammate who wasn't doing their work. And they resolved it. And I think that that's a lot of what we're talking about here, is that relationship. It's, how do you relate to your leader? How does your leader relate to you? How do you walk into your leader's office and say to them, hey, are there any initiatives that you think are really important that I should be focusing on? It's not tasks, but things that you'd like to see getting done. Or is there anything that's on your plate that I can help take off your plate so that you can focus on the things that are really important for you to focus on? One of the people who worked for me, he was trying to figure out how he could help his leader. He knew that the leader was, his manager was overwhelmed. His team lead was overwhelmed. And he was like, I just don't know how to approach him because I have a lot of experience and I'm not a leader, but like, I chose not to be a leader. I said, no problem. And we spoke about how he could walk into the room and act as a mentor and a coach for his team lead. And suggest things that he could take off his plate, or suggest other team members who may be available to help out with certain things given their skill sets. And so what that did for the team lead is it made it okay to ask for help. It made it okay, especially in the private area of like the one-on-ones, to ask for help. And it completely changed the dynamic of the team because everybody was on board with this once that started happening. Once they saw this guy start taking some of the stuff off the leader's plate, and then the leader would come and say, hey, I have this thing. You're really good at this. I have to focus on this other thing. Would you mind doing this? I know you're very busy. And it completely changed the dynamic of how the team was running. And that was a follower. Like he wasn't a leader, but he emerged. Like there's your emergent leadership, but it's not really even emergent leadership. That's just really good followership. Like, that's what courageous exemplary followership looks like. He wasn't leading a process. It wasn't strategic. It was tactical at its core. It was a tactical maneuver that helped the team out. And those things are the bread and butter of good followership when it comes to the interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, thank you. Those are beautiful stories. It's also just such an encouragement to, all of us wherever we are to think about teamwork as a little bit more fluid. I could hear from some of my clients, I work with people and they're just like, that's not my job. That's not my job. That's not my job. They're kind of just contracting themselves, into their defensively into a job description. And I understand sometimes it feels like that's a survival tactic, but I think the broader lesson here is like allowing a little more fluidity in groups, thinking about like, what are those very specific tactics, personal tactics we can use within the group, that there's just so much benefit, maybe like all benefit comes from thinking that way. So thank you for sharing those examples. I want to make sure I leave a little time here to ask how followership comes into your teaching in the military preparation academies.
That's a huge discussion also for me. It's a huge realm where followership has what to play, because there you're talking about functionally and fundamentally the difference between command and control, and mission control. And the difference between command and control and mission control is huge. Command and control it's hierarchical. I'm in charge. I give orders. You do what I say, and that's it. The mission control is, we want to go from here to there. Here's why. Go. You guys have to figure out how to do this on your own. And if you come up against any problems, why we're doing this. Figure it out. And that was very much the nature of my unit. And now I'm seeing it become even more prominent in the way we discuss missions and how teams work together in the military. And that makes followership super duper relevant there for me as well.
What else is on your mind right now? What are you thinking about in followership in your own work that you'd like to share?
I mean, there's a couple of different things right now that I've been sort of focusing on in terms of followership. one is, and this is going to sound silly, but or crazy, but how's generative AI going to play a role in followership and leadership? This is a huge one, both in terms of the training that we're doing in workshops, in learning and development processes, but also in the ability for someone to, they have an issue with their boss and go to, Chat GPT or to some other, Bard or whatever and go, I'm having the following problem with my boss. Can you give me some tips about how best to broach the subject, talk about this, and how that's going to impact that interpersonal relationship? So one of them is that. One of them is the influence of Chat GPT on the relationships that we're having on the teams. And I think that that's going to be a huge one in the next year or two. I think those are going to have a huge impact on how teams work, because you can take 2 minutes and figure out the best tactics to engage when you feel like someone's micromanaging, or when you feel like one of your team members is not quite working up to the level you would expect them to be working up to, and to talk to them about it through the realm and lens of followership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Followership GPT.
Yeah, seriously. I'm going to make it an app. That's exactly what it's going to be called. So that's one. And I think that's going to be a big one, just because of the impact it'll have on how people relate. So that's one. And the other thing that I've really been dealing with is how to make followership really real in everybody's life, like in my household, in my community, to show what it means to be a good follower and really bring followership into the everyday discussion, and not just business. And it's not just in business, it's niche in business. It's like super, super, super duper niche in business. So for me, one of the major things that I'm trying to do, and I mean, I've said it on LinkedIn, this is the hill I'm willing to die on. I'm going to talk about followership until I'm blue in the face. And I'm going to talk about followership in any way I can in order to show how it is relevant in your life, in our lives. On LinkedIn, it happens to be that I use it a lot in the business world, but you want your kids to follow, and you want them to demonstrate good followership and emergent leadership, and you want to take them through a developmental process, just like situational leadership talks about, where they go from not knowing how to do anything to knowing how to do all the things you want them to know how to do on their own, like their laundry and cooking and cleaning and their homework and all those things, which they have no how to, like, you have to teach them and develop them and coach them. And then anyway,
I want to insert a note here for listeners to go back and check out the episode on supportive listening with Aron McGunn, who created a program called Parenting for Humans that talks about listening as a core followership skill. It's a fantastic episode. So, Dr. D, please share with listeners where they can learn more about your work.
You can find me on LinkedIn, where I write a lot about followership, and you can find me on Facebook and at my website, www.drdleitner.com, DRDLEITNER.com. I look forward to people reaching out.
Wonderful. We will put all those links in the show notes. Thank you again for sharing all of your wisdom with us today, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Shauna. I look forward to it as well.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music, and a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.